So, Chequers has been proposed to the UK Parliament. My reaction? We should just leave, and here is why. Theresa May is one of a long list of UK Prime Ministers that have been humiliated while trying to get concessions out of the European Union. She's also one of many Western European presidents and Prime Ministers whose views have been criticised or overridden by the European Union. The European Union is increasingly acting as a powerful, separate and largely unaccountable state. And at its core, the Chequers proposal is that we should lock ourselves into their trade policy indefinitely. Coupled with this, there is an implicit threat that if the European Union doesn't have a deal with us when we leave, they will make life difficult for the UK and its exporters. There will be difficulty over badging. UK flights might not necessarily be able to pass over European skies. There will be bureaucratic checking of our exports of goods when they arrive on the continent at Calais. Now, all of this is a form of economic warfare. We are told, time and again, that businesses need stability in order to be able to trade, even if they are not themselves trading with the EU, which is the case for the bulk of British businesses. This was, incidentally, the same argument as was used 20 years ago by those who would have sought to force the UK and sterling into the single currency. Now, do you see a lot of stability inside the European Union? Can I suggest that things like the mass unemployment, particularly of youth across southern Europe, migration problems and the subjugation of the Greek economy are all indications of actually extreme instability inside the European Union? And yet the proposal from the Conservative leadership is that we should seek to be controlled by the European Union's protectionist trade bloc indefinitely. And as a bonus, the European Union wants £39 billion for the privilege. Let us be quite clear. The House of Lords has already determined that if we leave the European Union with no deal, that £39 billion would not be payable by the UK. Nevertheless, the Conservatives want us to pay it. £39 billion is a lot of money. It is equivalent to £1,300 for each of the UK's 30 million taxpayers. £1,300. Well, let me think if I can work that out in my family. That would be £1,300 for me, £1,300 for my wife, £1,300 for each of my hard-working children. That's over £5,000. And for what? Well, it could have bought good local services. It could have perhaps paid for a part-time learning assistant at one of my local schools or extra NHS support. But no, it's to go to the European Union in order largely for us to agree to be controlled, to do what the European Union wants, to follow their regulations, and without any influence on the setting of those regulations. Now, this is having a serious effect. As a result of the Chequers announcement last week, the Australians have announced that they will no longer be seeking a trade deal specifically with the UK. Because if we are part of the single customs area, the Australians really had better do a deal instead with the European Union as a whole. And therefore, if we ended up with a trade deal, it would be between the European Union negotiators and the Australian ones. And we would be carried along with it without ability to affect the deal at all. Now, we were told repeatedly that no deal had to be better than a bad deal. What we are being offered is no deal or Chequers, plus a bill for £39 billion. I think for everybody, the choice should be obvious. We do not want membership of the single market. We don't want to be part of the European Union anymore. We merely want access to the single market for our exporters. Access is not the same as control. Switzerland, Norway have access to the EU single market. Canada is being offered access to the single market. That is what we need. Why is that deal good enough for these other countries and not good enough for the UK, despite having paid billions in contributions over many decades? Chequers is immoral. It is about always giving preference to EU suppliers over any other supplier of equivalent goods elsewhere in the world. We are currently forced to impose extra taxes on goods from our friends, from goods from poor countries, from rich countries, whatever, if they are not from the EU. We are, for example, sending poorer countries aid, but we are not allowed to give them trade preference, particularly not in those manufactured goods which would allow them development and prosperity. As a consequence, we pay more for coffee to the German suppliers than we do to the whole of Africa combined. We cannot just be delegating now our trade policy indefinitely to a Brussels elite that we are now leaving. We are all voters, we are citizens, we are consumers. Our market is worth something. We inherited our democracy from generations of past struggle by our forefathers. 200 years ago, next August, we are going to be commemorating the struggles in Manchester that led to the Peterloo Massacre. That massacre was a struggle for democratic and citizens' rights. We have that legacy, we have received that legacy. We must think about how we are passing that legacy on. We should be deciding this sort of stuff as citizens, as voters, not as people who are supporting one particular political party or leader or another, not as members or as partisan voters. We should instead be thinking about this as a citizen's right. We should be deciding to look after our own trade policy, not delegating it to Jean-Claude Juncker's. I am opposed to the Chequers Agreement, and I am opposed to any Member of Parliament or political leader that is prepared to vote for it. Just leave.